Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I am in Eugene, Oregon, at the base of Willamette Valley. I'm at King Estate Winery with COO and winemaker Brent Stone. Brent, welcome, and tell us about King Estate Winery.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. So King Estate Winery, we are located at the very southern end of the Willamette Valley. So we are, I think, the most southern winery in the AVA. Mm-hmm. We have been here for a number of years. The winery was founded in 1991 by the King family. We are still privately held, and the King family is involved daily. They are here. Ed King is our founder and acting CEO. And the family is really involved in a number of operations from sales, marketing. And so very much a family business still, and really a great place to live and work, Eugene, Oregon. So.
Yeah. So I drove up here, and it's just surrounded by the most beautifully manicured vineyards. How much property are we sitting on top of, and how much of it is acreage of vines?
Yeah, so the total property size is 1,033 acres. Of that, about 475 are under vine. That's predominantly Pinot Gris and Pinot Noir. The balance of the property is quite diverse. We have anything from gardens, which we use for our restaurant. We have our own bakery and our own charcuterie. It's very much a farm-to-table model here. And then we also have some wetlands and oak savanna, and so it's quite diverse. We are certified biodynamic property, so at 1,033 acres, because the entire property has to be certified. We are the largest biodynamic vineyard in North America. So, and that's been the case since 2016. Prior to that, we had been certified organic since 2002, so there's been kind of a long-standing commitment to sustainability here from the King family.
It's a very all-encompassing property here. But you're not just making wine from estate fruit. You're also sourcing some fruit. And can you tell me a little bit about where you're sourcing and what other grapes you're working with?
Yeah, so it's actually quite unique as far as Oregon wineries go. We are going to make 64 wines this year. Yeah, so it's a lot.
We'll let that sink in for a second.
The bulk of that is small production. So I'd say around 50 of those are 500 cases or less. So there's a big emphasis on kind of like premium small lot production and kind of direct sales. So whether that be wine club or right off the property here. But to make that many wines and really the diversity of kind of varietals, we're going to work with 26 different varieties, grape varieties this year. So we have to cover basically the entire state to make that happen. So we source as far south as Illinois Valley, really the southernmost vineyard in the state, all the way to Walla Walla, Washington. So we cover quite a bit of ground. And that's anything from, Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir right off property here to a lot of Rhone varieties we get out of the Rogue Valley, Southern Oregon. And then a lot of our Bordeaux production is coming out of Walla Walla. But all that comes here to the winery and is all fermented, and blending is all done here. So.
Right. And we just walked through the winery, so everything is fermented separately in small lots.
Very much so. So yeah, as we went through the winery, you saw a lot of those small fermenters. So as we've grown as a company over the years, we've stayed very true to this kind of small lot separation approach. So our largest red fermenter is 8 tons. And so while that creates a lot of fermentations, like during harvest, we'll have upwards of, say, 400 fermentations at any given time. It does allow you to maximize quality in any given site. So you don't have to combine blocks or picks during harvest to fill a tank. You can just emphasize that one block, pick it when it's ready, and it will be fermented separate, and that will be the case all the way to barrel. So every block, every clone from every vineyard is all kept separate, and we really maintain that separation all the way to blending. So it's pretty unique for a winery to do that at scale.
So you're making a lot of wines, 64 different bottlings of wines. I know you said that most of those are small case production, but what is your total case production here, and where are your vines available?
Yeah, so for King Estate brands, our total production is about 150,000 cases. We do some production beyond that. in the form of custom crush. But for our wholesale brands and direct sales, it's about 150,000 cases. We are distributed nationally, and then I think in 8 or 9 different countries as far as King Estate brand. And then we have a smaller brand, which is distributed in a number of states. It's called North by Northwest, and that's more of a Washington focus. That's the Bordeaux production that I mentioned earlier. And then the balance of our production is sold just right off property or via our wine club.
Fantastic. So tell me, you were telling me that you aren't originally from Oregon. You were born in Idaho and raised in Utah and such. So what is your first memory relevant to wine?
Yeah, those aren't very notable wine regions, as you would guess, Idaho and Utah. So, my family were always very much into fermentation, beer and wine. My wife has been in craft beer for a number of years, and so I think I had always grown up with that influence. I moved to Oregon in, I think, 2002, and that was really when I started to see Oregon Pinot Noir for what it was, and it's just such a fantastic place to grow and make Pinot. And then from there, that really just I got the bug, and just decided that was an industry I wanted to work in. So I'd say early exposure, not really because of where I live, but more because of family, and then that just kind of grew once I came to Oregon.
And what would you say is one of the most memorable wines you ever drank, and what that occasion was?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've had a number of them.
I am sure.
I always like to throw it out to Oregon, and one of the first Oregon producers that I tried, I had an O2 Beaufrere Pinot, and this was early on when I was kind of getting into, and it was so good. And I think O2 was a great vintage for the state, so that a lot of producers did well, and then they've always been a very well-respected producer. So that kind of got me going on Pinot, and then from there I tried a bunch. And so there are so many good producers here in the state, and it's still very much a kind of a collaborative approach in industry, to where the guy next to you is doing well, then it's good for you too, and Oregon's always been really known for that kind of unity. So I'm happy to give credit to Beaufrere for kind of turning me on to Pinot, and the Etzel family, still involved in that winery. So, but that would probably be the one that got me started. Yeah.
Have you spent a lot of time traveling around the world tasting wine, or have you focused mostly on this area?
No, I think the nature of the industry takes you quite a different number of places. So, I've been through like Rioja and Portugal, mostly on business. But of course, you're gonna try the wines. So great wines through like Douro Valley and then Rioja, obviously a very notable producer or producing region. So. And then, of course, being on the West Coast, you can't ignore our neighbors to the south, and Napa and Sonoma, and such fantastic wines for years now coming out of those areas. So, and then because we do business in Washington, we're also up there trying wines quite a bit too. So, I'd say because I live and work in Oregon, the bulk of what I do drink on a daily basis would be Pinot Noir, but I've tried thousands of wines outside of that.
So if we were to come to your home and enter your cellar, whether it was, a proper cellar or just a few bottles, well, I'm sure it's more than a few bottles, but anyway, what kind of wines would we find in there, and from where? Yeah,
so that's a good question. It's Pinot heavy for sure, and it's taken over the better part of the house. So I think the wife would prefer that we maybe drink more than we're collecting. But I'd say heavy Oregon Pinot, just again because so many of my colleagues are here. But beyond that, I have some really nice Sassicaia, kind of the original Super Tuscan, and I'm fond of what those guys have done there. And then Napa Cab, a number of people that we interact with daily are kind of from that area, and they're still, the center of maybe the West Coast wine universe. So drink a lot of cabs from there. And so I'd say a pretty good mixture, Pinot heavy. And then Washington, to me, is underrated for its Cabernet. We source wine from Red Mountain, which I think is a fantastic area for Cabernet, and a fraction of the bottle price you might find elsewhere. And so can't help but get my hands on some of those as well.
So tell me, you're working with a lot of different grapes. Do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
That's a good question. I don't know if anything is a perfect variety. I think they all come winemaking in general and this industry can be quite fickle, the nature of a harvest and just vintage variation and variation across sites that I would say that most varieties are far from perfect, but they're unique to themselves at least, and that's why I think you get in wine, and that's why I think people drink wine, is it is different. And, even perception of flaws or positive attributes, that's very specific to the person drinking the wine, and so I think a wine can maybe be perfect for an individual, but there's really no such thing as probably a perfect variety, but not yet, at least.
What's your take, your opinion on critics and scores?
That's tough. I think we all kind of face that pressure in the industry, and that we know our wines have to score, particularly if we want to get certain placements. And so, from that sense, I think it puts a lot of pressure on producers. All of the work and sweat and everything that goes into making a bottle of wine, and you're at the mercy of a handful of people. So there can be a lot of pressure there. At that same time, I think consumers certainly reference them, and until that's no longer the case, then if they're important to customers, they're important to us, And so we try very hard every year to put a wine together that we think the critics are going to like and is going to score well, but without kind of sacrificing regional identity or varietal identity. You want to stay true to kind of who you are as a producer and not cater too much to any one critic. But having said that, you realize that they are important and they do help sell wine. And so I think most of us would be lying if we said we didn't care. So, I'm certainly in that camp. We watch them. And when we get them, we certainly use them to promote our wine.
So getting down to you as a wine consumer, red, white, or rosé?
Should I take any one of them depending on the day? I think the more you work in wine, the more you kind of gain an affection and appreciation for all those, for any number of varieties. And there's that whole, the time, the place, the meal, the company, and, different wines are going to do better in different circumstances. So I'd be hard pressed to give you one a firm answer there.
If you had to pick one, still or sparkling?
Oh, shoot. Yeah, again, I would say still wine, just given, maybe a broader spectrum of style and varieties, but it's hard to beat a good glass of sparkling wine. So, yeah.
So you said you have a lot of wine at home and your wife's into beer.
Yes.
How do you guys approach food and wine pairing? Do you follow rules? Do you sort of do a come what may, whatever happens to be in your way in the house that you grab and move out of the way?
Yeah, we need a better system than we have, that's for sure. We geek out on it quite a bit, actually. We'll do a lot of blind tasting. We'll brown bag them, just as a fun exercise together. Can we identify the producer or the region or the style or any number of things? And so we'll go as far as taking it that serious, just as a fun activity, to just what's good on a Friday afternoon. So we're far from having a developed approach to managing that cellar, but we do, again, because we're both in the industry, try to have a deliberate approach to tasting some of the wines.
Mm-hmm. And do you think there are rules to follow when pairing wine and food?
There's certainly plenty of suggestions out there. I would say, in the end, preference is going to trump all of them. If you love Cabernet and that is the wine for you, and who is anyone to keep you from having your Cabernet? Having said that, I think you can really maximize the experience on both sides, the food and the flavors that come with it, and then how the wine shows, both can be maximized with the proper pairing. So I think more can be gained by having a deliberate approach there, but in the end, I think people should have the freedom to drink and eat what they want and just enjoy it.
Yeah. For someone who hasn't tasted King Estate wines, what do you think they're missing out on?
They're missing out on a bunch. We... as most producers in Oregon, are very, very quality driven. We grow more fruit, source more fruit than we need for our programs. We're very, very particular about what makes it into the bottle here. We've stayed very true to varieties. And so, our Pinot Noir, I think, is something that you would expect from Oregon if you knew Oregon Pinot Noir in terms of varietal correctness. And we haven't let maybe trends with, whether they be critics or customer trends really drive or change winemaking style or practices in the vineyard. We stayed very true to those things. So I think if you know and love Oregon wines, I think King Estate is a great pick for you.
So of the 64 different wines that you make, if space aliens were to land on your property, which of those wines would you want to present them with?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. Shoot, you could go a couple different ways with this. So I would say our kind of flagship wine, because of how we've grown as a company, would be Domaine Pinot Gris. And a lot of that's because, and I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, as a company, we, early on, this is long before my time, there was a conscious effort to really kind of drive the style for Oregon Pinot Gris. What should it taste like? Early experimentation. Is it sweet? Is it dry? Is it oaked? Is it not? And King Estate was really an early pioneer in what became a whole category, Oregon Pinot Gris. And is really, although now we make 63 other wines, I think that kind of really put us on the map early on. And we're probably still most known for that variety, as much as we are a great producer of Pinot Noir too. So I'm assuming those aliens would be coming to King Estate to try Pinot Gris. And so I would say Domaine Pinot Gris would be the one. And it's also our owner's, Ed King's, favorite wine. So there's extra pressure there to make sure that it turns out good. And so I would trust that the aliens would have a good experience there.
Ooh. It's all making sense now. If that's his favorite wine, and then I know you have a restaurant on property, and we just had lunch there, and I had the halibut, which you said was his favorite dish, and I can see how those pair very well together. Yes. Speaking about pairings.
Yeah, I think in general, that's what a lot of people love about Oregon wines, whether they be Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir, quite acid-driven, very, very versatile on the food side. So you can get an Oregon Pinot that will pair well with salmon, but you can go into some sites where you're going to get a very well extracted high tannin Pinot too that'll do well with a steak. And so as varieties go and regions go, I think Oregon stacks up to a number of them in terms of versatility on the food pairing side.
Wine Soundtrack, the voice of American wine growers and makers.
So let's talk about property. Biodynamic producer. And for those who know a little bit of biodynamics, just a little bit, they might think you just run through the vineyard naked all the time.
Yeah, we don't do enough of that.
I know that with biodynamics, you're following the moon, and you're really in touch with what's happening every day. So how much variation do you see from vintage to vintage? Do you see more things repeating themselves or not from year to year?
I think part of the emphasis of biodynamic is to show the vintage variation. It's all about hands off, minimal manipulation, and kind of that bubble mentality. Everything is coming from off property, and you're not, capitalizing and acidulating. You're not manipulating the wine to follow some sort of recipe. You're saying, okay, the fruit is going to come in, and whether it be a cool vintage and it's going to be lower alcohol, higher acid, or conversely a warm vintage and riper, more lush Pinot, that it's going to show the vintage. And so I think that's one of the cool things. And one of the things you can expect when you drink biodynamic wine is if you know the vintage well, you're going to taste the vintage, and you're going to taste the site and what makes that site different from maybe the one up the road, because it is so hands off. So I would say there is more variability year to year with biodynamic wines, at least the finished wines, but I would say that's intentional.
And looking at this area in the southern part of the Willamette Valley, do you see more consistency or variation from year to year?
Good question. Yeah. The site, our particular site, is quite high in elevation. We are the highest elevation in the Willamette Valley. So that's good and bad. So in cool years, obviously, we're going to struggle to ripen where others do not. But in warm years, particularly as we've had recently in the state, and I think most places, we've done quite well. And so we've seen a lot of consistency year to year as Oregon's had this string of really, really, I'd say, warmer, low disease pressure, clean vintages. Our site has been very, very consistent and produced great wine. So I would say if that current trend persists, you're going to see more and more consistency out of the southern Willamette here.
So do you have any good luck rituals for when harvest is about to start? That's when you run through the vineyards naked, right?
Yeah. I would say we have a rich over there. We have a couple of traditions we do here. We get everyone together. Such a strong team here, and we emphasize that throughout. It's very kind of low ego environment. So, there's 4 winemakers. There's a number of people from cellar managers down to supervisors, and everyone has equal say. We're all vested in the process. And so I think that kind of inclusion approach kind of makes everyone feel a part of harvest. And so I think that that only helps. And so, but we make a point of getting everyone together before harvest, and then the company throws a kind of a post-harvest party as well. So I think it's definitely that kind of almost like summer camp atmosphere where you're getting everyone together. And particularly at the start of harvest, spirits are so high because people are curious to see the vintage and what the fruit's going to look like and what are we doing with the wines. And it's such a unique experience. And they're all different, which again is unique to wine that, you've done it for a decade, you've done it 10 times, and each year continues and will always be different, and you're going to learn something every year. And so I think those things kind of make every harvest unique, and it's certainly not unique to us, but it's just unique to wine, which is cool. But,
yeah. And at the beginning of harvest, everyone's all rested, energetic.
It's a far different take, probably, the dog days. So you're 60 days in and, people haven't seen their families, and it's very much a household commitment, and that, your wives and your kids and everyone kind of have to pick it up during harvest because you're not there. And so that kind of makes it even more of a collaborative thing. And that it's not just the people that work here, it's their families.
Are there any signs or omens that you look for that will predict the outcome of a harvest?
Well, we have some great folks that are out in the vineyards almost every day. Our director of viticulture, Ray Nuclo, has been a part of the industry for years and in the state, and such a well-respected human. And he covers a ton of ground. And so he is and we've had such long partnerships with most of the vineyards. I mean, some of them date back to the beginning. You're talking 25, 30-year partnerships. So because of that consistency, both on the personnel side and really with the vineyards themselves, I think there's a lot of familiarity with the sites. And so if things are or look like they might go awry, we're usually pretty proactive. And so, in this game, and particularly in Oregon, it's all how you finish too. You can have a great growing season and then get a real nasty spell of weather in the fall, which does happen. So, you're really not out of it till it's in the bottle.
Yeah,
it's kind of
can't really predict what's going to happen. So many producers walk in their own cellars, or they walk in the vineyards and they talk to the vines, or they talk to the wine in the barrel. Tell me, as a biodynamic producer, dispel any myths, or convince us that what we think is true. Do you talk to your grapes? Do you talk to your wines?
I have never personally talked to them, but I'm sure there's some that are. I think you can take biodynamic and you could pick it apart really from a technical standpoint, as sometimes technical people do, and say, well, there's no science that might support this approach, so that means the whole thing isn't correct. So I think that's the problem with doing that. It really takes away from a lot of the things that fundamentally are right, and you're in terms of the lack of inputs and synthetics and things that you're doing, just really in terms of responsible farming. And then really the amount of people it takes to do all those things. To us, we always just say it translates to just having more people in the vineyard, more people in the winery. It just takes more people to make biodynamic wine. And that can't help but translate to quality. And so where some of the more philosophical arguments might fail, I think in the end, it's still a very responsible approach. And we think, again, it makes and has made very great wines here.
But it doesn't mean you have to talk to them. And
you don't have to. You can.
Encourage them along.
Yeah, a little pep talk probably wouldn't hurt, particularly in the middle of the tough harvest. But maybe this will be the year. I'll have to try it out. Yeah.
So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Shoot, I'm still figuring that out. I was very much into science. And so I kind of started on that path. And I wanted to be a scientist. And that's the cool thing about working in wine. There's a technical side, there's very much an agricultural farming side, and then there's kind of this planning and logistical piece too, and so it kind of allows you to be a part of all those things, and so I don't think I strayed too far from where I thought or wanted to be, but that's an evolution in itself. And
when you're not working, how do you spend your free time?
Yeah, so
do you have free time?
Not as much as I used to, that's for sure. The Northwest is a great place to live, and so we do, a lot of fishing and hiking and golf and river rafting, and so if you like the outdoors, it's a great place. You have to get used to the rain, so. I know a lot of our friends from California move up here, and they're like, "Oh, cow, how's this going to work?" But you get used to it, and you can go out on a January day if you don't mind a little drizzle and take in like a great hike. And so I'd say it's very much outdoor driven, and that kind of takes up a lot of our free time.
Thinking back, what would you say is one of the best pieces of advice you've ever received?
Good question. Shoot, I've had or have been the beneficiary of some great mentors in my life. So I feel like I wouldn't do one of them justice if I singled any of them out. So I will just say,
if you have a couple great words of wisdom, you can share them.
Yeah, I think more of a philosophy than specific words. But one of my early supervisors when I first started out, he had this huge focus of, again, this kind of team approach, low ego approach, and often almost exclusively gave credit for his successes to the people around him. So he was he would transfer all of the success out, but then anytime anything went wrong, he would own it, whether it was him or not. And I remember being very, very young in my career and thinking, holy cow, that's the way to do it. And that has just made an impression on me for a lot of years. So I would say, not specific words, but more of a philosophy, I think that has probably had the biggest impact on me, at least my career.
And if you could offer some advice to our listeners today, what kind of advice would you like to share?
Well, I think since this is focused on the wine industry, to wine, I would say if you're considering a career in wine,
run.
No, I think it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, I think you come and you work a harvest and you're going to find out really quick whether it's for you or not, because you just have to immerse yourself in it so much. It becomes so much a part of your day, your week, your month, your year, and you don't know really when to stop because you become such a part of those wines, and then it bleeds into the next year. And so it becomes like an identity and you live it. And for some people, that is everything that they're looking for. And then you see them around here every day at King Estate. People just have the bug and they love it. But I don't think there's any way to really know that until you come and you work a harvest and you see the whole process and you find out really quick whether it's going to be for you or not. I think there's this kind of romance that surrounds the wine industry that fades pretty quick once you're working a harvest and you realize, like, hey, this is farming, this is production, this is hard work. And if you can make it through all that it can be a fantastic industry and career. And so that would be I would say, come work a harvest. And it's a pretty good indicator of kind of what you can expect.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
It is. Yeah.
So looking back at your career in the wine industry, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Yeah, I would say, again, it seems cliche, but really the group we've put together here at the company. I mean, there's some of the I think in general, the wine industry, as I was just kind of alluding to, is very attractive. And so to a lot of people as career. And so it attracts a lot of talented people. And if you can put a team together, which I think we've done here, where you just have the very selfless approach and kind of common goal of let's go make great wine. Let's be decent people. And if you look at the company, you know anything about the Kings, very, very philanthropic, great people. And so I think just as a company, that's probably what we have to be most proud of. I think we're known for that outside of here. And it's some of the best people that you will meet. And the team itself, to watch it all go during harvest is such a great thing to see, but I think it's also a great accomplishment. And it's not mine, it's the company's. But
your philosophy at work.
Yes, very much so, yes.
So complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
No place you want to be.
Now, imagine a scenario where someone is photographed by the paparazzi sitting in a restaurant, and on the table is a bottle of your wine. Who would you want to be drinking your wine? Living, deceased, famous, or maybe not famous, but is there one person that you would love to see drinking a bottle of King Estate?
Shoot, that's a really good one. John F. Kennedy. I think he would be a great ambassador. Kennedys are cool, great visionary. When you look at kind of, I think, what he did for the presidency, and now though he died young and he was a martyr, I just think he was this kind of this symbol that was great for American politics. And I just, I don't know. It's the first person I thought of when you asked me. I was like, yeah,
that's great.
I'm sure he likes good Pinot, and shoot, he would have never been around to try much Oregon Pinot. So
yeah,
I think that'd be the guy.
So where do you see the wine industry as a whole, or Oregon, in, a couple hundred years? I mean, do you think we'll be drinking wine in 300, 400, 500 years?
That's a great question. I think a whole lot of people want to know the answer to that too. We talk about that in general, just trends, industry trends. Are fewer people drinking wine? If so, why? And I don't think anyone knows the answer to that. I sure hope that people continue to drink wine. I mean, I think it's one of the last true kind of farm to table beverages when you look at how it's made. We're in the vineyards every day and we follow these grapes. We put them in a tank. We follow them every day in fermentation, and you see it all the way through. And your footprint is on that product throughout, and it's so unique to the producer and to the vineyard. And there's just so much identity that comes with a bottle of wine that it would be a shame if people stop drinking wine. Whether they will or not, I certainly don't know. But it's a good question. I think a lot of people want to know that.
Well, we won't be here in 500 years to know that.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
So name 3 wines you would take with you to a deserted island.
Okay. Well, I think we'd have to take our Pinot Gris, right? So we already just talked about that. So I would take probably Domaine Pinot Gris. You would need a very good I would take the Sassicaia. There you go. A very good, super Tuscan, bold wine. And then you would need something. I imagine the island's hot, right? So we probably need...
It's your island.
Yeah, that's true. You probably got to get... some champagne on the island, right? Gotta have bubbles. I think we'll probably round it out.
A red wine and sparkling.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So that'd probably be it. Yeah.
Well, this leads me into the game we play with Wine Soundtrack, where we pair wine and music. So I want you to tell me, based on some of the wines you've talked about today, what music you want to listen to or makes you think of. And we're going to start with your Domaine Pinot Gris.
Domaine Pinot Gris. Okay, well, it's a wine that just makes you feel good. So I would have to put that in like the kind of soul category. I'd maybe give like Hall & Oates or something. Very good pairing there with the Domaine Pinot Gris.
Okay. Yeah. One of the first wines you mentioned at the beginning when we were talking was the Beaufair 2002 Pinot Noir. What about that wine?
Very good one there. So finesse for sure, but also kind of lush. So you'd probably have to put that with, like Michael McDonald or something. Yeah, that's probably a good combination there. Yeah.
Okay. And what about your Sassicaia, your big super Tuscan?
Oh, yeah, big, bold. That'd have to be like MC Hammer. Yeah. Again, makes you feel good, but it's there. Yeah.
And then you were saying how you are a big fan of the Walla Walla, Washington Red Mountain Cabernet. So tell me about what you'd pair with one of those.
Shoot, that's another kind of very big wine. So you couldn't throw just anything at it. I'd probably say Motley Crue. Style, but still some flash. And again, it's there. That Red Mountain wines, they've got this kind of very distinct, at least I think, this kind of chalky mineral component that is very unique, but it's also a very bold, expressive wine. So yeah, I'd give it to the Crue there.
Fantastic. So Brent, I'm wondering, you've traveled a bit around to different wine regions. What's at the top of your bucket list next to go to? What wine region are you just dying to go explore?
Well, for as much time as I have been in the wine industry, I've never been to France. So I would say any number of very notable regions throughout there. My wife just got back from there.
And she didn't take you?
She did not, yeah. And went all through, Alsace and Champagne. And so I would say... But that's still kind of the birthplace of the industry in most minds. So that would have to be the spot. But Italy, obviously, right up there too. And there's so many great wine regions in the world that I think you could spend a lifetime. But those would be at the top.
Well, you're going to have to start planning and tell your wife to take you next time.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, can you just let our listeners know? Can they visit you, and where can they find you and your wines and this place?
Yes, you absolutely can visit, and that's a great place. Like I said, we have a restaurant on property, and we have gardens and that grow vegetables for the restaurant. We have our own bakery, our own charcuterie chef. So it is a great place to come and have a fantastic meal, and then any number of very, very good wines to go with the meal. So we are just outside of Eugene, Oregon, about 20 miles southwest of town, and it is a great destination winery. You can spend all day here and leave very happy.
Fantastic. So, and just to remind people, I mean, Willamette Valley extends from Eugene, Oregon to the south, Portland to the north, or, just outside of Portland. So this is a really great opportunity for people to fly into Eugene and start here before they go out on their journey.
Yeah, we think that's a great way to do it. The Willamette Valley being so big and so much diversity across sites. Yeah, you come into Eugene, you start in the south here with us, and you work your way north. It can be a great wine trip, and it can be a great sampling of really what the Willamette Valley has to offer.
Well, Brent, thank you so much for joining us today at Wine Soundtrack, and we'll start planning our next visit here soon and hope to have more people come and visit. And in the meantime, have a wonderful afternoon.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.